quickly to Portaccio Alessia Portaccio. Alessia, it's fine.
Hello. Hi.
Are you ready?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. I can share my screen. Yeah. Can you see it, right?
Mm.
Perfect. Can you see it?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So, hello everybody, and thank you very much for having me. I am Alessia Portaccio, and I come from the University of Padova in Italy. And I'm going to present you my work on where we assessed the presence and species richness of owls and woodpeckers through ecoacoustics in two differently managed alpine forests. So this work was part of a bigger project or a bigger research project, which was entailed in my PhD, which overall objective was to contribute to the understanding of the role of the EU nature directives, such as the Birds Directive and the Habitats Directive. So we wanted to understand their role as driving forces of forest biodiversity change. And we use birds as a performance indicators of the implementation, the effectiveness of the implementation of the Natura 2000 network, which is a network of protected areas, protected sites, which covers almost the 20% of the EU land area only, and also part of the marine area. It's a coordinated network of protected sites, and is composed of special protection areas according to the Birds Directive, and special areas of conservation according to the Habitats Directive. However, even if it has been implemented for almost 30 years, there are still some hindrances and shortfall in the implementation of the Natura 2000 network. For instance, according to the latest report on the state of nature, which was issued in 2020, we can see, for instance, that forest habitats are not doing that well, because most of them are in an unfavorable conservation status. On the right side, you can see that birds seems to do a bit better. However, we have no information about the conservation status of the 14% of the bird species within Natura 2000, which is quite bizarre, quite unacceptable, since the Birds Directive is entirely dedicated to such taxon. So in the frame of this specific study, we focused on two main taxa, which are owls and woodpeckers, which are very important bioindicators. They are indicators of naturalness and indicators of the forest at the late successional stages. For instance, forests are also very important because they excavate cavities which are normally then used by secondary cavity nesters, while most owl species have specific forest habitat needs, and their presence reflects those of various other forest-dwelling species. So this study aimed to gather information about the presence and species richness of owls and woodpeckers in relation to the main forest structure and composition variables in two differently managed forests. So the study area was in the northeastern district of the Alpine Arc. We are in Italy, in Veneto region, in Belluno province, to be precise. And we have Tovanella Forest and Caiada Forest. As you can see, both these valleys are included in three actually Natura 2000 sites. And Tovanella, which is the one on the right, is non-managed since the late 50s, and it is a natural reserve since the 70s. While Caiada is a forest which is still harvested, and it actually is non-intensively managed. So here you can see the design also of the survey. We distributed 10 plots in both of the valleys. And something which is quite important to mention is that in October 2018, both the valleys have been hit by the strong windstorm Vaya that happened in October, in late autumn. And it was one plot in Tovanella was hit, and two plots in Caiada were hit. And you can see here from these photos that even the wind-thrown areas have been differently managed. So these two valleys have similar, comparable ecological characteristics, but the management is completely different. So in Tovanella, the wind-thrown area has been untouched, while Caiada has been cleared up 2 winters after the event. So, as I was saying, our dependent variables were bird-related data, and we collected these bird-related data through the implementation of ecoacoustics. So we gather information about the presence, the species richness, and the number of contacts of bird species belonging to owls and woodpeckers taxa. While our independent variables were forest-related data, and specifically, we gather information about the basal area, the dominant height, the canopy closure percentage, so more structural information, then some more information related to composition, so tree species diversity and tree species density. We gather information also about the status of the living trees, but also information about deadwood, so deadwood volume in total, but also of the main components such as standing dead trees, snags, logs, and stumps, and the decomposition stage of these elements. We gather information about living trees in the circular plots, and then we gather information about deadwood in those rectangular transects. And at the very center of the circular plot, as you can see, there's a yellow dot, is where we put the fixed recording device, and this was done in each plot, and the fixed recording devices were deployed contemporarily. So we decided to use AudioMoth because we wanted to study a cloud, a cluster, a network of survey plots. And of course, there were some resources constraints. And also, since these areas are quite remote, it was quite easier to bring with us along the long trail, the long walk to reach these areas uphill in the Alpine Mountains. AudioMoth were quite more comfortable to bring with us. So since we bought AudioMoth when still, the cases were not inbuilt yet, were not offered yet by Open Acoustics devices, we decided to build our own. So we used junction box, where we drilled a hole in correspondence to the microphone, and we secure it with duct tape. We tried to paint them in order to allow for some camouflage. They were quite mimetic. And we positioned them, we located them at more or less 2 meters height on a tree, which was in the center of each plot. The recorders have been deployed for 20 days in February 2020. They recorded 10 minutes each hour, every day, every night. And then, of course, for time matters, we decided to sample, and we analyzed 2 days, every other 2 days, for a total of 3 million seconds. And this is always nice when I'm presenting this work mainly to people who are involved, who are actors and stakeholders involved in the management, or anyway in the use of these forest areas and of these Natura 2000 sites, because this way I can also describe what we do and exactly what we have here. So when I say 3 milliseconds, of course, you all know, since we are at the Acoustic Congress, that we didn't listen to every single second, but we were helped by the analyzer of the sonograms. We use Pratt software to do this. And I just wanted, normally I wouldn't probably show this slide in such a context like this one of today, but I was really inspired by the speech of this morning from Alice Eldridge, but also the presentation of yesterday about the switch off and listening. And I really think that ecoacoustics is not just a mean to analyze the data, but also to actually present the data and help the decision-making processes. For instance, I think we should hear what I'm broadcasting now. This way, with this slide, I could communicate to all the stakeholders, so managers, users, other researchers that were interested, and so they were stakeholders for these two specific sites. I could explain what was happening there, what we could record, and how we did it. So it was a sort of it allowed for a sort of a kind of a level of involvement of the different stakeholders, and it helped also the conversation about further conversation about management. So we analyze the data. So as first, we assess the presence and species richness of the two taxa. Then we assess the differences between Caiada and Tovanella, modeling the bird-related response as a function of the site. So we built a generalized linear model using Poisson error distributions. These were mainly dealing with counts. Similarly, we assess the response of the number of contacts of bird taxa in general and of specific and the species to forest structure and composition variables. We decided to model 2 terms per time in order to avoid over-parameterization. So we made a multi-comparison approach based on IECC, so the Archaic Information Criterion corrected for small samples. So the main results, in both the valleys, we had the presence, we could record the presence of black woodpecker and great spotted woodpecker, which are anyway the most common species in our areas, in our territory. But in Caiada, we detected also the gray-headed woodpecker, which is normally more linked to large broadleaf presence, and also the presence of open patches. And in fact, the 2 points where we detected it were C2, the point C2, as you can see, which was a place where we had which was a wind-thrown area, and C4, which was the plot where we had the highest share of broadleaves. We are also quite confident to say that we detected a tree-toed woodpecker, but we had not enough recordings to be sure and to include it in our analysis. Also because it was not signaled in those areas up to now, because it's normally present at higher latitudes. So we think that further research is needed for that. Owls, so again, we have some common species which are in both valleys, which are tawny owl, pygmy owl, and boreal owl. There is a more distributed richness of owl species in Caiada, actually. And again, another surprise in Caiada, we detected little owl, which was quite a surprise because the species normally not common at those altitudes, but it can happen. And it's really important to see that we have, for instance, pygmy owl and boreal owl in a protected forest, because according to literature, there are not enough protected suitable areas for these 2 species. Then we, as I said, we compared the 2 sites, and so we found that there were a significantly lower number of contacts of woodpeckers and owls in general in Tovanella, as well as for great spotted woodpecker and tawny owl. So we wondered why we had such a difference between the 2 valleys, and we modeled the responses. And actually, we found that the independent variables which show to be influential on some of the woodpeckers variable are the quantity of dead wood, and surprisingly, it had a negative effect. However, these can be further explained in relation to the negative influence of more advanced decomposition stage. Indeed, in Tovanella forest, we have more conditions for quicker decay of wood. And the more rotten, the less is suitable for both foraging and both nesting for woodpeckers. Owls' contacts instead seem to decrease with the increase of the canopy closure. And this could be explained by the fact that thicker forests won't allow light to reach the ground, and therefore there are no favorable conditions for the presence of micromammals, the favorite prey of owls. So actually Tovanella, since it's been abandoned in any fairly relatively recent time, it's still a very thick forest. So there's a lot of shade, and there's no shrubs and not renewal of the forest cover on the ground. So a quick final remark. We can say that both valleys anyway showed presence of woodpeckers and owls, which are sign of a mature stage of both the forest stands. And it will be, so it can be considered also a sort of a preliminary study, a sort of a baseline, because it's really interesting to see the future, because Caiada is going to be consistently managed in the future, while Tovanella is left to free evolution. So according to our results, we can say that if we want to draw some guidelines for sustainable management of mountain forests, for conservation concerns, we can say that we should avoid excessively close canopy if we want to manage, and guarantee enough suitable trees and tree species so we can guarantee also the future availability of dead-related habitats. A very quick remark on the use of audio moth. So it presented some limits in their performance in the sense that there were some noises related to the machine itself that were somehow covering the frequencies where we normally detect these two taxa, woodpeckers and owls. However, we really think that they are still appropriate for an analysis in a network of survey points, and they really allow to get fairly good results while minimizing the costs. So I just would like to mention and send our thoughts to Professor De Battisti, who started this research path on ecoacoustics at the University of Padova, and unfortunately is not longer with us, so he can't really see our results. And I will conclude thanking you for your attention, and if you have any questions, I would be glad to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alessia. Excuse me. And okay, we open for discussion of this interesting paper in so endangered area of our country, especially after the climate events that have shaped this forest. Some questions?
Thank you, Marco Gamba. I could see the comment.
Okay, thank you. You read it by yourself. Okay. I would like to have some comments about the difference. What is the difference between the canonical system to assess the biodiversity, especially of birds, and using ecoacoustics? Have you experience of field ornithologists? Because it's my impression that field ornithologists try to avoid the ecoacoustic approach. They prefer to counting birds directly using standardized methodologies that are very old indeed and not efficient. I have been a field ornithologist, so I have knowledge about this, but have you an idea what is the advantage to use a field ornithologist or ecoacousticians? Your results could be comparable.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, I was lucky enough because actually in this research, a field ornithologist was actually involved, and it was one of my supervisors of the PhD, and is normally doing point counts for his normal job. But he was also the one who introduced me somehow to ecoacoustics together with Professor De Battisti. So, so for this specific job, we didn't compare the two methodologies actually. Also because one of the pros of using ecoacoustics, mainly for woodpeckers and owls, is that you can just leave the recorder outside, and the ornithologist doesn't need to go in the night, in the snow, in very remote areas, and get lost in the forest. So for sure, that's a very important aspect and detail of using ecoacoustics. Then I think that there are pros and cons of both the methodologies, and we didn't manage to do all the analysis, but in one of the two forests we put both an SM4 and an audio moth recorder, and then we made also point counts during down course of breeding birds, so mainly in relation to passerines, where we can actually have a sort of a comparison. We really didn't have the possibility to make all the analysis, but I think it depends on the conditions and the type of forests and the type of bird community that we are actually studying. So I think that in very complex site, in very difficult areas, the ecoacoustics can help a lot, or where we are studying more, let's say, shy species. So the presence of a human being might might disturb a lot their activity. But yeah, I think so. It really is probably a very politically correct answer, but I think it depends for sure.
Okay. See you, please. The questions are rose by Sandra Muller and Gianni Pavan. Can you read?
Yeah. So I thank for sure Taylor and Sandra that helped me at the beginning of this project, actually, because I was a guest in Freiburg. So they had a problem too with self-noise of audio moth, because exactly, it also, for us, it was a bit the same. It wasn't really covering totally, but of course it made it a bit more difficult to detect. Mainly, I would say owls, because it was really covering that bandwidth where owls are vocal, actually. So yes, we found it, and we probably considered a part of error in our in our research. However, with the right settings, it was also possible, or with the trying to clear also somehow the sounds where it was not where we had some doubts, it was possible to detect a little bit better the species and recognize it. Yeah, and thank you to Gianni. Actually, we really hope to get to the analysis very soon about the comparison between the different methodologies.
Okay, thank you very much. The time is really